And we are live. Hi, everyone. My name is Autumn Keynes, and I'm the virtual buddy for this session with DigPed Toronto. We've got a wonderful group of virtual folks from around the world with us, and we're joined with some folks there on site. I'm going to get started by letting the virtual people introduce themselves. I'm going to start with George. George, give us a quick introduction.
Hi, I'm George Station. I am a lecturer at California State University, Monterey Bay, and I teach lower division social science with a technology and society theme. This semester, I'm working with lecturer faculty on the more global topic of lecturer community on campus and lecturer sense of belonging as a class of adjunctified people and so on. And it's an interesting project through our Centers for Teaching, Learning, and Assessment here on campus. Very interesting stuff. Thanks, George. How about Jim Luke?
Hi, I'm Jim Luke. What am I? I'm professor of economics, Lansing Community College, and I am also the Open Learning Faculty Fellow in our Center for Teaching Excellence now.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Jim. Kate?
Hi, folks. I'm Kate Malloy. I'm a learning technologist in Kelt at NUI Galway. So I might see some of you folks at OER 19 next month. And I would love to tell you the weather's beautiful, but Galway's great. It's not raining. And I'm actually coming back to DigPed Lab this summer myself as a fellow. So I'm interested to hear about what's happening in Toronto.
Very exciting. Thanks so much, Kate. Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha Streamer Veneruso, professor at SV on Twitter. I know most of you from Twitter, as well as some other virtual connecting and other things. I'm at Montgomery College, Community College in Maryland, just outside of DC. I'm the chair of our General Studies program, and I run an e-portfolio pilot, as well as some various things around open pedagogy and open educational resources.
Very nice. Thank you, Samantha. And next I'm going to have Nate go ahead and introduce himself. I also just want to mention that Nate is another virtual buddy on this session, and he helped me with all the planning and logistics and all of that kind of stuff. So Nate, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm actually going to have you turn it over to the on-site people. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Autumn. I'm Nate Angel. I work with Hypothesis, the nonprofit that develops and stewards open annotation technologies and practices. I'm very happy to be here. I did very little for this except start the Hangout, and so I will pass it over to the folks on the ground to introduce themselves and get us started.
We leave an extra person here now. Squeeze in, squeeze in. Hello, Jess O'Reilly. I'm here from Cambridge College in Sudbury, Ontario. I'm an instructional developer there. Super excited for this conversation, so thanks for having me.
And Helen Deward, my first DigPed, and it is an amazing experience.
Co-director of Virtually Connecting.
Co-director of Virtually Connecting.
Rebecca Hogue, co-director of Virtually Connecting. I live in Sunnyvale, California, teach at UMass Boston, and I'm doing a PhD in Ottawa. And I'm here. This is, I'm doing the digital storytelling track, and I'm having a lot of fun. And it's so great to see Helen for the first time. And so we keep poking each other because we want to make sure we're real.
I'm Dave. He's poking me out with the first time meeting Helen through that street.
Oh, you haven't met?
No, first time. I got attacked while I was walking down the corridor. Somebody came flying over and hugged me, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Helen!" I'm leading the open pedagogy track here at DPL.
Well, thank you guys so much for giving us a little quick introduction there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your tracks and what's going on? Dave, since you're leading a track, why don't you tell us what you've organized for folks and what kind of things you're working on?
So I'm leading the best track. It is. It's been really fascinating. Actually, I've got 2 tracks in my track, so I have a good track and a bad track. I've never seen a group of people split in half the way this one has. I literally have one side of the room who is always trying to do the right thing, and the other side of the room that's totally trying to subvert everything. No, it's so great. It's so great. So what we've done is we are trying to map open. Yesterday was the day of happiness. So that was the day we tried to map open and tried to talk about open pedagogy and talk about all the very pieces of it. We did a bunch of activities around there. Today is the day of sadness. Today is the day. Yesterday we built a wall of sadness all day yesterday, which was every time anybody said, "Oh yeah, what about when this happens?" Put that on the wall of sadness. We'll talk about that on the sad day. That's tomorrow. So today.
Sorry, I just want to make sure everyone's had a chance to grab lunch.
No,
it's just down there when you get there.
So today's the day of sadness. So today we used the Spidell article, which I can send it along. It's a fantastic article about how not to do learning contracts. And we use that to interrogate open and talk about all of the challenges that really come up whenever you try to do open pedagogy in the wild. So we're going to give students choice. Yeah, well, they've never had choice, and they spent 10,000 hours of their lives being in classrooms where they never had any. So that's not going to work just the way you structured that. So we did all that this morning. So we came out crying, but better people for it.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're able to give them some structure. I'm curious, what were some of the things on your wall of sadness? Can you remember some of them?
On my wall, some of the things on my wall of sadness?
Yeah.
Oh, there was a lot of sadness.
We're doing a shuffle. It looks like we said this was going to be like a round robin kind of session. So it looks like
smart people are arriving. So the wall of sadness has a lot of things like, what about students who don't come to school with the tools they need to take agency inside those spaces? It has things like, what about the teacher who doesn't have the time to actually do that? What about, so it's all of those problems, all those challenges. It's fine to talk about open pedagogy, and I think for me it's a deeply democratic, important, like teaching complexity to me is the thing that helps us with our society, and this is what this is all about to me. But there's an awful lot of problems, awful lot of challenges you're going to confront there, and the wall of sadness is just a way of collecting all that stuff. It just
I love it.
Right, wall of sadness.
Does it have food insecurity on it?
You know what? That never came up. It should be there. Totally.
I get really sad when there's no food.
It makes everyone sad.
So it was also a way of controlling the class discussion. So I find that whenever we talk about open, there's always somebody who's going to come up and go, well, what about this and what about this? And those are good, important comments, but you can't only have the conversation about the challenges, and you need to kind of to filter those out. So we spent the day of happiness trying to build a structure, and then we spent the day of sadness, the morning of sadness this morning, attacking that structure. So this afternoon, we're going to do apply that to the projects they started yesterday, and then we get a joint session with the inclusion people where our openness is going to be inquired by the inclusion folks. We're going to do a joint effort where they're going to take what they've learned about inclusion, we're going to take what we've learned about open, and we're going to marry the two tracks and see if we can interrogate open with inclusion. So that's the design for the rest of the day.
We're marrying with you later.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Wow.
It'll be better for the process.
No, I really like the structure. I really like the content. I'm sad that I'm not there and part of it, but it's great that I get to have a peek in, that we all get to have a peek in. Jess, why don't we take a second so that you can introduce yourself? You jumped in here in the middle, so I want to give you a chance to do that.
Hi, I'm Jess. I am Jess. I work at the Inclusive Design Research Center with the fantastic people there. My boss said something really nice to me yesterday, so I'm smiling a lot. And she's awesome. Yuta Treviranus. She's the sort of motivation for so much of this work in inclusive design, and brilliant and awesome. And I'm here. Oh, and yes, I'm giving a keynote tomorrow, which I'm feeling.
Ukulele, though, right?
I'm not going to be using a ukulele, and there'll be no dancing. A friend of mine said that when I sing, I sound like the Muppets.
Oh, that's perfect.
No, I don't think that would be good.
I think that's really good. I think you should work with that. What do the Muppets have to say about inclusion? I'm not sure. Poor Beaker did need a little bit of help, though. Seriously. Like, I mean,
Poor Beaker.
Poor Beaker.
But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I've never been to a DPL thingy, and it's been really good. really interesting.
Well, it's awesome to have you here to talk with us a little bit about what's going on there. Are you participating in a track too, or any of the other activities?
What was the question?
I didn't get it either.
Oh, sorry. Are you in a track, or are you participating in any of the workshops, or are you doing any of the other kind of stuff?
Yeah, so what's really cool is I did nothing. I didn't register. I just showed up. And everything worked. And I was invited to participate in the inclusion workshop. And Amy Collier has been leading it brilliantly, just really brilliantly. And what was really kind of cool is being in there and then watching as she facilitated the session and referenced a lot of the work from the IDRC where I work. And it was humbling. Like, it was cool because we get so little feedback from people who use or like our work. It was so cool to see people interacting with it and to watch that. And I thought it was really helpful for me, you know, not intentional user testing or anything like that, but just getting some anecdotal feedback and watching people interact with some of the tools and seeing what works for them and hearing about what works for them on their campus and what doesn't. I've been really trying to sit back and enjoy it, which has been fun. It's a lot less exhausting than leading it. So I've really been having a great time.
So funny. My work did actually come up in my track yesterday, not nearly in such a wonderfully affirming or sort of encouraging way. So about 20 minutes into my session yesterday, and we're talking about open, what open pedagogy is, somebody goes, wait a minute. She opens her computer, scrolls down a little bit. She goes, I heard you talk in 2017, and what you said open pedagogy was, and then went off to list what and I was like, oh my God, what did I say in 2017? I have no idea.
Isn't that the worst?
Oh.
Okay, I'm having on-site freeze up on me. Is everybody else seeing that
but
too?
It was not antithetical to what I was saying. This time I was able to weave it into the discussion a little bit. So
we lost you there for a second, but it sounded like you kind of got called on some stuff.
But I mean, that's what. Oh,
they missed me.
There's lag.
There is lag.
There is a big lag. Are we back?
Now, are you guys back? Can you hear us now?
I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
I am hearing you. It sounded like you got called out on some stuff from 2017, maybe?
Oh, so, yeah. So I had apparently done a talk for somebody, which she had heard, and then wrote a blog post about it and recorded everything I had said about open pedagogy in 2017.
Has your thinking,
changed a lot? But have you heard me talk before? I can't remember what I said from one day to the next, the same as Jess just said. Yeah. There's no way. I have no idea.
It's kind of crazy when that happens. What's nice about it is it can be the beginning of a conversation, but there is that moment of sinking feeling like, oh crap, I don't remember what I said. What kind of mood was I in that day? Did I drop an F-bomb?
Possible.
It looks like Mark has just joined us virtually. Mark, did you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, depending. Sorry I'm late. I'm Mark Wilson from Oakland, California, and a digital humanist and ed tech kind of person, and a student, a really old student. So,
aren't we all?
Nice to be with you.
Get in line, Mark.
Well, we can rank age order, but it would be a waste of time.
We've had some side conversation in the chat bar here about some of the resources that Dave had, and then some stuff about rhizomatic stuff. Does anybody from the virtual group want to jump in with questions, comments?
I do have a question. To make sure I've got IDRC, I think you mentioned, and if you could tell us a little bit about that, because there's like a bunch of IDRC acronyms out there. Thank you.
Yes, we're the Inclusive Design Research Center, CENTRE. We are here in downtown Toronto, and we are the largest research group at OCAD University. We are 25 years old this past summer, and for 25 years we've been doing soft-funded work on accessibility, on inclusion, on design, on participatory design, co-design. We have a really international group of people a community that works as an open source community. Open access, everything is available. So anything we do is available. All of our code is in GitHub. We build tools to make teaching and learning more inclusive and more adaptable to learner needs or preferences, rather than asking all learners to adapt to exactly the same content type. So we've got something called Learner Options. We've got a project with the Hewlett Foundation that's called the Flow Project. That's FLOE project.org. That's a good starting place for us because we can be a bit of a fire hose. We've got 25 years of work in our website, so it's really a mess. The Flow Project is a great place to start, especially for people in education, where we try to thoughtfully come up with ways to make education materials, practices, processes more inclusive. So trying to uncover what are the cycles of exclusion and trying to build ways to combat those. So we've got things like the Inclusive Learning Design Handbook, which is for content creators to do sticky things like how do you make simulations accessible? So we've done a ton of work with CU Boulder and the FET-Sims folks. I've been working with them in moving from, they were in Java, I believe, to HTML5. What's been really kind of exciting about that experience is they asked the question, not how do I do an equivalent, a direct mapping of the simulation for instance, a non-visual user, but how do I preserve the experience of discovery, epiphany, exploration, those things that are so wonderful about the FET simulations and so wonderful about that learning experience. We've done work about sonification of charts. So when you look at a pie chart at a glance, if you're a visual learner, you can get a sense of who has most of the pie. How do you do that using sound, for example, to get that at a glance view? Yeah. That's what we do. Yeah.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I see the Spidell article going down, and I call it the Spidell article because she was the grad student and he was the supervisor. So I only make reference to her work because I'm guessing that's probably how that went down. Small moments of resistance are still moments of resistance. So just a note on it. I use that article as a negative example. So if you look at the contracts at the end of it, they're actually dictatorial, elitist, and not very friendly. So I don't use that article as an example of how to do learning contracts. I use it as a way of pulling out the ideas and the struggles around learner contracts whenever you do it badly. So I don't want anybody thinking that they go into it and go, oh, I should go ahead and try to do it this way. That'd be a terrible idea.
Dave Cormier recommended this article.
What's that?
Dave Cormier recommended this article.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So when you look through the article, there are moments where it says, oh, we learned when we did this that we should probably do this in a negotiated curriculum. Yeah, no kidding. If you're going to negotiate the assessment, you better be negotiating the curriculum. But they hadn't done that. So it's a really, really helpful article to bring people through the idea and that open pedagogy is not going to be a walk in the park. It's not something you just go, ta-da, I'm going to be open today. It's really hard work. And this shows what happens when you don't do that hard work.
Wow.
So I wanted to put that caution in place.
Yeah, that's an important one. Dave, it looks like somebody new joined you. Is that Lucy?
Hi, yes, I'm Lucy. Hi.
Did you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lucy Ryan from the Open University. And what do I do? My background is teaching social work, research around writing in a professional and academic context in social work. And I am director of a scholarship and innovation centre. Been working quite closely with Sean and Jessie for a number of years, bringing their ideas over to the OU and thinking about how that can change our practices. Lots of similarities with the States and Canada, but some differences too. I guess the main issue with us is that we are almost entirely online. We have virtually no face-to-face contact at all, and that creates some challenges.
But some opportunities too, right?
And some opportunities, yeah. So I'm going to be doing a workshop later looking at how we might be able to use social media as a way to try and encourage students to participate more in peer-to-peer learning. That's a real challenge for us, both face-to-face and online, that we get very low participation. And my interest from writing is around student identity and thinking about how the way in which student identity is kind of masked or presented within online spaces can be quite scary in terms of, encouraging participation in peer-to-peer learning. So I'm interested in hearing what other people have, what experiences other people have around that, of getting that engagement when there isn't any face-to-face contact.
Do folks have some ideas about that? Getting engagement with students through digital identity, maybe with social media, but really just like when we're separated from each other's physical.
So the kind of feedback I've had from students is that when they're going into online spaces, they don't know who everybody else is, and therefore that creates anxiety about participating, and they assume the two examples I've had of students either assuming that everybody else is much more experienced and capable than they are, and then they feel very anxious about joining in, or students are characterized in particular ways and then kind of picked on to give particular experiences. And those are quite difficult. I think with social media, one of the things I'm interested in is the way in which that enables you to present yourself in a way that you choose to present yourself, as opposed to the VLE, which you don't have a lot of choice in.
Yeah, so that makes me think about digital identity and what are we doing to empower students to create digital identities for themselves. If you are confined to the VLE, I'm not a big fan of the VLE or the LMS. I mean, like I can use it, but I know that some people are in environments where they have to use it, where it's kind of dictated that they have to use it. So what kind of experiences can we create through maybe just like even an introductory assignment or something like that to help them be able to articulate their identity a little bit better?
Yeah, and I think some of it's giving control back to the students. With social media, they generally have more control. The VLE, they have none. It's use it or don't use it. They don't have much control over it. But it's been a really good few days so far.
Samantha, are you trying to say something? I am not getting audio on you, but I see your lips moving.
Hold on, I think I turned my mic off. Is that better?
There we go. That's okay.
Better. Sorry. What I was going to say is there was a really interesting session at an ePortfolio workshop back in January down in Atlanta, and the interrogatory or question was, when we are asking students to develop ePortfolios and to present their online identities, are we actually shaping the identities by asking them to do that? Because we're asking them to perform in a public and particular way, and they're trying to match what we expect. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think it was a really, really deep and it's, got me thinking all along is, what are we doing when we ask students to perform those identities? We want them to transform, we want them to grow, but are we even, how do we create a holding space that allows them to do that without shaping and structuring it and supporting the way that they're going to grow that's the best way, as much as we're asking them to be performative? And I think when we're online, a lot of times they are performing to what they think, their perspective of what an instructor wants, their perspective of, what other professors have wanted, and how do we get them to own it in a little bit more way? I don't have any answers, but that was just, it's a really, really layered and complex question.
No, I agree with you. And there's also the performance to the other students as well as to the teachers. And it's not something that we generally have a conversation with students about. It's take it or leave it, or you have to take it if it's part of your assessment. But there isn't much negotiation involved.
Do I own my domain if you grade it?
Sorry?
Do I own my domain if you grade it?
Yeah.
Right? I wonder, it seems like a particular constraint when we're working inside of a class, right? Because there's one point of power, really, kind of like the instructor, right? And you can definitely see where a student would try to mimic or give that instructor. But I wonder if we get a little bit broader, if we start talking about whole programs, and if we start talking about digital identity in the framework of a whole program, and so that at least that way there's multiple points of power, right? So there's instructors in multiple classes. There's maybe a program director. There's maybe a department chair. There's maybe an advisor or something like that. So at least it's not just students trying to meet one person's idea of what a digital identity should look like, but at least they're getting, feedback from multiple places, and hopefully maybe that gives them a little bit more space to let themselves, shine a little bit more.
I think also there's a conversation around, I have focused on having explicit conversations with students about the fact that a digital identity is something that they can shape just like they do in a personal identity, and that it's a conversation around understanding audience and purpose and who they're trying to work with, that we are in everything we do is somewhat performative, but having that as an explicit conversation rather than having that as a sort of power-based conversation. It's kind of like you have the power to decide and to understand and to work within that system. And I think because we are an educational system and you can't break away from that, if I'm asking you to do any portfolio or if I'm asking you to perform in an online class, there's no moving away from that, because that's a requirement for the course and it's a structure. But I think if you can be honest and explicit and have the students understand, and that's where the complexity of open pedagogy, I think, comes in to tie back in to some of the things we struggle with, that sense of students not being able to cope with that. You turn it over to them. You have the power to understand this. You have the power to interrogate this, to make choices. That's what we can give them the power to do, if that makes sense.
I'm also curious about when we lost the screen. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm also curious about the difference between if you're in an on-ground classroom and there are elements of your identity that are you can't make choices about whether you share them. You're there physically in the room. When you go into digital spaces, that starts to be a question. And I think some instructors start to get anxious about being invasive in terms of people's privacy in digital spaces where they wouldn't in a face-to-face context, because it's just human interaction, and that's the way that it happens. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I find it curious. People become nervous about it.
Well, and there's also a record kept in a digital environment, right? In a face-to-face synchronous environment, it's so ephemeral. The things that I say, right? they get said, and we have that moment together, but then we leave, and they're not recorded or tracked in any kind of way. And it makes it really difficult, I think, to do that social domain of learning. And I've equated it to in the past, right? Like, because to do the social piece of it, to really make that feel authentic, I think there needs to be a certain level of trust. And when everything's being recorded and everything's being tracked, it's really hard to develop that.
Yeah. May
I throw one in on that?
Yes.
I'm thinking that it's one of the challenges that I'm starting to see in my face-to-face classes is that there is some recording going on some of the time. And I think it's just inevitable because people have devices out and they're doing things with them. But it's not that I'm not teaching in a way that I've got, neo-Nazis recording every word I say or anything like that. So it's not that kind of a situation. But I think that we're in an environment now where we need to at least think about the fact that most of us can record everything that's going on most of the time. now. And not to get too over the top about it, but it's a reality even in a face-to-face class where people supposedly aren't recording anything. And I haven't posed it as a question for my classes yet, but every now and then I get a surprise because someone may be authorized to record a session because of a disability or something like that. And probably about once every year and a half, someone records a session and then tells me later and shows me the paperwork where they're authorized. And, oh, isn't that interesting? Well, I wonder what I said today. You know, it's not so ephemeral. It's not so ephemeral anymore. So anyway, just wanted to make things annoying.
I mean, that's true of a lot of basically any of our spaces now, not just learning spaces, but no matter where we are in the world, you could be recorded, observed, end up a meme or online in some way that you might not plan. So it's interesting to think about how that reframes a lot of our different expectations of space.
It does. I'm not sure that people are there yet in the face-to-face, though, where they actually, I think you have to call it out, right? Like at the beginning of this session before we went live, I was like, hey, everybody, just so that you know, because I feel like this kind of situation, even though it lends itself so easily to recording and live streaming, which we're doing, right? It also mimics the face-to-face and in the flesh kind of experience. And I'm not sure people are there yet where they're automatically kind of feeling like, well, this could potentially be being recorded. But we've had a new person join us and you just gave us some wonderful little bits there. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Marissa Petrich. I'm an instructional design librarian at the University of Washington, Tacoma, and here in Toronto at Digital Pedagogy Lab.
Thank you for joining us, Marissa. It's great to meet you.
I've got a question. I'm a follow up on this discussion we've been having about the digital identity. We've been focusing on the students, and I really liked how people were phrasing it as they may feel like it's performative. But I'm a little more struck also by the systemic institutional issues. You know, Samantha, you can probably relate to this. You know, at community college, you know, we're 85% of the instructors are adjunct. And it's tough enough to try to be that oddball class where you're going to encourage students to develop a digital identity and do something like that. So then you have to take the overhead to explain it and try to get into it. And yeah, they do tend to, let's be performative. What is it the instructor wants here? But part of that's because they go to all their other classes or virtually all their other classes, and that's what the instructor expects is performative. And in fact, the instructor is performing. You know, I'm struck with how do I get students to think in terms of developing their own digital identity when I've got the vast majority of the faculty refusing to think of their own digital identity. You know, the challenge we've got is, you know, I know at some, you know, research schools, or at least the one that's just down the road from us, they've got a big effort to get faculty to develop a digital identity because they're trying to push the research. But, you know, we don't have that. And, you know, it was kind of like the same challenge we've got on writing. Everybody talks about writing across the curriculum, but I think that's a pretty big challenge when the faculty don't write.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've been doing on a course I'm currently developing is we've got, it's a team written course. We've got about 12 authors. So it's maybe not typical to other people's experience, but we've got each of the authors to record a video talking about their personal and professional background and why that makes them interested in contributing to the course. And that's really important for us because generally the way at the Open University materials have been written in the past is that they are very heavily branded and sanitized and edited so that we edit out the individual identities of the authors. But what we're increasingly finding is the students would value much more that connection with a real human being who they can follow on Twitter, they can look at their readings, they've listened to them talk about personal experiences. They'd rather have that than have consistency in terms of the design of the module and the voice that's coming across to them. So that's been quite an interesting experience for us.
That's an interesting phenomena, and I'd really appreciate it if anybody at OpenU, when you came to that conclusion that maybe we need to, brand it less, or make it, less corporate branded, and put the people back in it. If anybody wrote about that or blogged about it, that would be really useful for me to see, because it relates to research and stuff I'm writing now.
Okay. I shall see if there's been anything written. I mean, it really came out of student analytics that there was a huge resistance from the branding department, surprise, surprise, to breaking away from that, and also resistance from I guess our equivalent with instructional designers as well. That it was seen as good quality is consistency, good student experience is consistency. But actually, when we start getting the data back from a couple of courses that went off piste and we're doing things very differently, the students are saying, no, we want to know who these humans are. We want to feel like we actually know them, and that we can follow them as individuals. And we don't mind if maybe the way the language is a little bit different, or the style or the balance of learning design is a bit different. We can tolerate that. But I'll check out whether there's been anything published or blogged on it.
Appreciate that.
I echo that request, especially as in California, we're just starting a statewide new online community college. And I'm suspecting that there's going to be a heavy dose of standardization and uniformity on the way across our, more than 100 community colleges. So yeah, that conversation is going to be important.
Wow. I'll also just throw out there that I think that we often do open, networked, connected learning. We talk about digital identity. We talk about digital pedagogy. And we try to implement that stuff into classes, but I also think there's a real need for doing that as faculty development, doing faculty development that is connected learning, doing faculty development around digital identity specifically. So that's just another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately too. I see Jenny joined us. Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? She might still be getting...
I'm not sure if I'm muted or unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear
you. Okay. Hi, everyone. Yes, sorry for joining late, but so I'm Jenny Heyman, and I am currently the chair of teaching and learning at Cambrian College, and I see Jess there. I'm not sure if anybody else from Cambrian College is there, but that's a new role for me. Prior to that, I was with eCampus Ontario, and just have been a long time practitioner in the open space.
And I just
hello, Jenny.
I do want to check in with the on-site folks, because we're a little past the half-hour mark. This is a longer than normal session because we've had people kind of coming and going, but I just want to make sure everybody there is okay. You've gotten lunch, that you're okay with continuing with us. If you need to step out or jump in, or if you want to step away, we can do that. I just wanted to check in with you guys.
Do you want to come in?
Oh, sorry.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
I feel like I've been seeing you for the last day or so on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed your keynote. It was so dynamic. I don't know if I've ever experienced anything like it. It was, if you guys are watching this, I'm going to go back and put the link to Rajiv's keynote in the notes for this particular session, because it's amazing. You need to watch it.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's funny, I was thinking about it this morning about normally after a keynote, I put my slides and a transcript of the talk online. And that, I mean, obviously, it's a spirit of openness over here. But in this case, I was looking at the recording of the streamed keynote. And in fact, the recording has the slides sort of washed out. So if you watch it, you won't really see the slides properly. Which in this case I quite like, because I shared some personal family photographs on there, which I'm choosing not to place online, for example. So I'm thinking through some of those things. But I'll also say that I think I said this yesterday. I think the room who was in it, the spirit of DPL, sort of self-selection into this community made it a place that was safer for experimentation. I'm not sure I would take that approach anywhere else. So yeah, I'm grateful that you experienced that through the virtual side of things. But yeah, I think it was a different feel, and I think if I'd thought more about the virtual experience of it, I might have been less experimental.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that you were experimental because I really enjoyed it, but I'm also glad that it worked out with the technology washing out your slides, that kind of protect the things that you didn't want to share maybe in such a wide audience. So maybe a little bit of magic intervening there.
I think it's really interesting that Rajiv just jumped right into the issue that we were talking about before he got here about the sharing in public spaces and the personal, being personal in public as students performing in LMSs or online environments versus in face-to-face, and how much they choose to share and how much their performance is maybe limited or structured or restricted by the environment. So funny that it's tapping right back into that same thread.
Yeah. So I'm loving the dinosaur above your head.
Oops. Am I on? Okay. He's a vegetarian dinosaur. He's eating a minion, and we all decided that minions are stuffed with marshmallow fluff. So it's not even vegetable. It's just sort of man-made stuff. So yes, he's my vegetarian dinosaur.
So I'm sorry to continue a little bit, but I mean, the background for you and relates to what we're already talking about is a very interesting researcher at the University of Texas at Austin. His name is Sam Gosling, and he does work on personality traits and the assessment of personality traits based on the spaces that people inhabit, virtual spaces as well as physical spaces. And he distinguishes between things that are, I mean, if you look at photographs, you walk into an office and there's, family photographs on the desk, but there's a difference between when they are facing the guest versus when they're facing the person seated at the desk. Same thing, if you get tattoos, I mean, I might have a tattoo, but I might choose to have it in a place where I will observe it, but not the world, for example. And the different purposes in terms of how you want to be perceived versus it's more for you as a mood regulator or something else. And he facing out as more identity claims. So I think it's interesting to look at that. I'm thinking about that obviously because of your office, but now in the context of this as well.
I think about that from time to time whenever I visit other people's office spaces, like what books do you have? Where are they? Mm-hmm. Are these like your most scholarly, impressive books, and are they right up front, or, where are the hidden spaces of your office?
There was a really, I think we lost them. There was a really fascinating presentation that I saw maybe 3 years ago at the Chair Academy from someone from one of the universities, a president from one of the universities in Canada. And he was talking about sort of negotiating between the tribal identity of people that would come to the university and the way that he designed his office specifically to be more welcoming.
You get that?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little as you're speaking, so we're getting only small pieces.
Yeah, I think you guys are actually breaking up.
You guys are breaking up on us, and we're not breaking up on each other. So, so we're worried about your connection there. But Samantha, did you want to try to maybe encapsulate that real quick?
Oh no, it's not that big a deal. It was just I was bragging on the Canadian folks for knowing how to do that.
Oh, the Canadians. We love them so much.
What did they say about us Canadians?
I don't know.
What I was talking about someone who, a presentation that I saw from a president at another college, one of the ones in Canada that has both tribal and non-tribal areas. And he talked about his office, and his whole presentation was talking about the way he structured his office to be welcoming to people in both communities, and the hidden parts of himself, including a tattoo that he then showed all of us, and just sort of the connections about identity. And actually, I think that really is very interesting. We started this conversation earlier thinking about how students are structured into boxes in performative ways by the educational spaces we create, but really thinking about how we do that as well. And actually, maybe that's really something that we all do. Like that's what we need to teach students how to do, period, if that makes sense.
So we have a question in chat that I'm going to read out. From Nate, it says, I would love to hear more from these new on-site folks about their DigPed experience. And it looks like Kate would like to hear that as well. So I mean...
Sure. I should chime in because I've really just been smiling and nodding the whole time I've been sitting here. All three of us have been participating in the inclusive design track. But I'd like to back up. On Sunday night, I arrived with a colleague and we ran into Marissa and we were able to have a connection, have a meal, get to know each other right before the conference even started. And so that's been a lovely takeaway as well, is the community building piece, the time and space allowed for making those connections, the emphasis on the importance of kind of finding your tribe and those advocates that are going to support you in this work as you return to your institution. So that distributed professional learning network has really been key. And I mean, we're only halfway through day 2 here. So that's been really lovely. It's been a great experience as a participant to like truly rub elbows with the keynotes and be able to share conversations in casual ways. This conference definitely feels like the word boutique almost comes to mind. I'm staying here at the Gladstone. It's a beautiful space. We are in small rooms, as is typical, you know, in older buildings in larger cities. So that proximity has really been something that's added authenticity and really unstructured learning that I've had a lot of positive takeaway from. Besides the actual, you know, planned curricula, which itself has been fantastic. And we started with an exploration of design that is unintentionally and sometimes intentionally meant to marginalize, generally speaking. Then focused in on education, then started thinking about various design frameworks that can support, but perhaps not fully, some of this work. So we're approaching inclusive design from a very nuanced and conversational, relational learning perspective. And it's been a series of fantastic rabbit holes so far.
Yeah, I would echo that. I'd say there's a huge willingness amongst participants here to connect and reflect and, you know, talk. I'm a solo conference goer. I didn't come with a group. I've never been here before. People are really accessible and easy to talk to, and willing to share what they're working on and what their experiences of things have been, which is a really great environment. It's nice to be here.
So I was struck by when you were describing it as a sort of a boutique event or conference. And it's funny with edtech stuff, we often use copy the metaphors of the cathedral or the bazaar, and I obviously much hope that this would be more bazaar, but I think you're right. I mean, and when you refer to it as a boutique, it reminds me of, I mean, we've discussed quite openly, Sean brought this up, the privilege of being here in terms of the cost and the ability to come. And I have to say, it's lovely to see the efforts that have been made. I mean, eCampus Ontario has sponsored so many people, I think like 20 scholarships for people to come and attend the event. There's a lot of students who are attending the event. In fact, at 4:15, there's a workshop that's going to be facilitated by a whole group of students from across Ontario. It's fabulous. There's a lot of the contingent faculty over here, a lot of early career people. So I think it is a boutique, but in some sense, it's a boutique that has invited people who normally wouldn't be invited into a space that is boutique, if you will. So, I mean, so yes, I totally see that there's the privilege, but there's efforts to be inclusive alongside that, definitely.
I'm going to lean into the chat here just for a second to see what we're getting here as well.
Yeah, I think Jim had a thing that he threw into the chat. Jim, did you want to ask that question out loud?
Yes. Yeah, I'd be interested, besides your DigPed experience, what thoughts have been occurring to you, realizing it's about half over? How are you going to take this experience back and, you know, bring it to your colleagues that weren't there? Because that's, you know, my experience at DigPed last year in the summer was enormously transformative for me. And I have enormously struggled ever since because I feel even more alien on my campus going back. And I don't want that to happen next time.
I think we're hearing that too. We talked about that this morning. We're all on the same track, and we talked about how we're going to bring it home. And one of the things that came up was the need to develop the community, either here or wherever you're able to, so that when you go back, you have that support behind you, even if they're not physically in the same space. Because I think some of us do anticipate that there will be give and take to how we do this. That we will spend time choosing battles, or that we might not have the space to bring everything back that we learned here. So I think we're going to bring it back with our allies that we've found, and yeah.
Yeah, I think in the morning when things kicked off today, Sean sent up the mic to allow people to express an intention for the day. And one of the things Jesse reminded us of, which I think connects with this, is the importance of self-care. And especially when you're sort of really trying to engineer change, or working hard and fighting forces within your institution, maybe without that many allies or without experiencing that degree of success. I mean, the possibility of burnout, the possibility of your flame getting extinguished is quite high. So the reminder of self-care was quite important.
One of the themes in our session, it's me again. Hi guys. One of the themes in our session was that change isn't a 100% solution. Is to remember that almost all this change always happens in small bits. And though you sometimes may feel like you're tilting at windmills, which is a conversation that happened a number of times in our session, small victories are still victories. And if you try to win the whole thing right away, you're not going to get there. You need a long-term plan. You need to sort of realize that you're engaging in something that's got a lot of people in there engaging with you, but it's a long haul. It's a long game. There's no doubt about it.
Well, I've always been famous for saying, I can be patient as long as it happens right now.
No. Sorry, we're just shuffling around and everybody's gone now. I just wanted to pick up a couple of things. One is I've been part of Sean's writing workshop class, and we were actually reflecting this morning on your keynote, and trying to think about the risks that were involved for you in doing a presentation like that, and how we might transfer that learning of taking risks into our writing, and what made us resistant to risks. So what were safe spaces and what were risky spaces, and what would help us, well, what the benefits were of being in those risky spaces in terms of being more authentic. And why we so often step away from being authentic, because the structures around the way that we write or the way we work in academia dissuade us from doing that. So that was a really interesting conversation, but it relates to the conversation about what I will take away from here. I think it's something about being part of this community that I suppose I feel I've been part of for about the last 3 or 4 years. That gives you the confidence to take risks when you go back into an institution that isn't necessarily warm with trying to talk about and bring about change. But I think within the Open University, I've been trying to bring some of the ideas in, and I've found that where it gets purchased with individuals at a grassroots level, there's an amazing amount of change, because people are very warm and receptive to trying to find different ways to work. It develops its own momentum, but it's not an easy thing to do.
I think Nate asked if we'd chosen our battles yet, which I have not. I'm not sure about that yet.
I think it's also important with that self-care piece too, though, is to stay connected to your community. And that could be maybe, reading publications, or connecting with networks and communities. It might be blogging yourself or publishing yourself. What we're doing right now is a huge way for me to feel connected and feel like I'm still kind of a part of things and stay a part of the conversations. And so I just want to thank everyone for being here, because I think that this is a great way for us to stay connected and keep those conversations going. We are coming up on the top of the hour now, and this session was scheduled for an hour. So I just want to check in. Do we have any final thoughts, any final questions for our on-site guests? Where are we at right now, everyone?
Hi, it's Jenny. I have a question that maybe is going to require more thought. But I saw yesterday go by on Twitter and didn't give it my full attention, this idea of inclusive design versus UDL. And so I'm guessing that's a topic of conversation in the inclusive design group. So I kind of look forward to hearing or seeing if people are going to publish it as part of their reflections, where we're landing with that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One of the things that came up in our conversations was this idea of centering what is unique or the challenges that someone might have because they're marginalized, as opposed to trying to not erase them, but design in this way that it is trying so hard to be for everyone that it doesn't recognize the uniqueness of each user. So that's part of what the conversations we've had around that so far.
Yeah, I'm looking at one of the comments as well, Samantha, talking about when you push boundaries or you push for change. Yes, institutionals are risky, some more than others. I think, yeah, I agree. Yesterday, one of the topics that came up was, yeah, I mean, I raised this as well, was pushing for this kind of change and taking those kinds of risks have more severe consequences for people, whether you're adjunct faculty, whether you're if you're in academia as a person of color. There's all sorts of ways in which the risks are uneven. So I think there's ways in which we can and just to respond to Samantha's question, there's ways in which we can think about modeling and creating structures that support that kind of work. And part of that is not leaving it to people who are, who are being marginalized, whether by design or whether by the economics of the neoliberal university, to have to always be the people to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely. Any final comments or thoughts before we maybe stop the broadcast?
Have you been here the whole time? Do you want to reflect on the session or anything?
Is there somebody over there? I can't see. It looks like somebody's there. It's Terry. Well, Terry has his question about wonder. Where are you at with that?
Oh God, I wonder where I am. I don't know. We in my session we dove back into process a lot and stuff. So we haven't pushed forward with the work itself. So I'm still wondering how to create wonder. Still, I'll let you know next time.
If you guys didn't see the last virtually connecting session that we did just yesterday, that was Terry's outstanding question. How do we create wonder? I guess I'll pose that to some of our virtual folks. Any comments on that? How do you create wonder?
Yeah, tell me.
Crowdsource this, Terry. It's a big one, right? All right. Well, we can keep working on it. Well, I want to thank everyone.
Yeah, they'll take half an hour to set up. All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who joined us on site. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your lunch hour. I know that it's an ask to ask you guys to kind of step away from everything that you have going on there to come in and spend a little bit of time with us, but it really does mean a lot to us. And thank everybody virtually who took time out of their day, whether it be work or home life or whatever it is that schoolwork, whatever it is that you've got going on, taking time to come and have these conversations with us. It really means so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. The connection will still continue. So if people want to stick around for a little bit and say goodbyes, we can, but I am going to stop the broadcast. So thanks so much, everyone.